Hello there, I'm Karen Antara. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Today I'm going to talk to you about the idea of life patterns and what they mean. So, more particularly about whether the challenges that we experience in life are actually preparing us for our life purpose. So, through working with many thousands of people over almost 30 years now, I've come to see that there are patterns that play out repeatedly in everybody's life. And it's fair to say that mostly people come to me for help with the negative patterns in their life. And in fact, they often miss the positive patterns that they can also learn from. But that's another story for another day. Today, I'm going to talk to you about the negative patterns, because those are usually the ones that spur us into action. Why? Because they are the frustrating ones. They are the upsetting ones, the ones that sometimes can even leave us feeling brokenhearted. And they're the ones that we want to stop. We don't want to keep going over and over those, do we? And I've noticed that these patterns play out again and again for people in very similar ways, but also it can be very different ways, but the same theme is there. So, for example, it could be romantic relationships that always end up the same way. Perhaps, you see a woman that goes, or a man, that goes into repeated abusive relationships. Maybe they seem to attract narcissists, they say. Or maybe it's about betrayal, where they're in a relationship and, the person that they're with has affairs. And then they enter another relationship and the same things happens. And the same thing happens again. Or maybe they are in a relationship and they find that the person that they're with is stealing from them. And then they leave that and they enter another relationship and the same thing happens. I'm sure you know people like this, if not yourself, right? So it could be that they enter a workplace where there's a narcissist or an abusive boss. They leave that job, they go to another one. Lo and behold, the same energy in a different body. So it's a repeating pattern. Or it can be a combination of these. But the bottom line is that you are always left feeling something the same in all of these situations. Maybe you feel that you've just been completely taken apart, that they've wiped the floor with you, that you're heartbroken, that you feel disrespected, abandoned, unloved, unlovable. Through all of these repeating patterns, there will be a similar feeling that you experience. Well, when we get out of those situations, we usually pick ourselves up, carry on with life, because that's kind of what we have to do, right? But at some point, we might find ourselves back in almost the same place, feeling the same feeling, because something has fallen apart again in our life. Or just when we think we're getting ahead, something happens and we go right back to the beginning again. Different people involved, a different place, but it feels the same. And it's not a good feeling. So people come to me often and they say, why does this keep happening to me? Or they say, why is this happening again? And they're so frustrated. But really, the better question to ask would be, what do I need to see and understand here? Why do I keep repeating it? What am I missing? Because ultimately, there is something that can be learnt from these repeating patterns and experiences. There's a lesson in this. And it's a very powerful lesson once you can see it. And when you do, that's when you begin to have the power to really change your life and begin to create better outcomes for yourself and not have to repeat the same patterns anymore. So I have seen that once people have this understanding, that's when their life begins to change in all the good and best ways. And it's like, they kind of move up a level. And now, from this higher level, they're able to look at their life from a totally different perspective once they've stabilized at that level. There can be a period of time where people move up into that higher level and then they fall back again, and then they move up and they fall back again. That's a little bit of a different scenario, but still a common theme, really, to be honest. So when they have moved into this higher level and really stabilized at that level, that's when they can really understand what these repeating patterns or challenges have all been about. And that's when they begin to see a whole different meaning to their life. So they are no longer a victim to those patterns. They move into a position of someone who has overcome those challenges. And so they can now speak to them from a place of embodied experience and wisdom. So that begs the question, are our biggest challenges and wounds a key to our purpose? Yes, I believe they are. But I've also found that it can be quite nuanced and individual. So, for example, two women or men may experience very similar types of childhood abuse. And once they've overcome it and they step into their purpose, that purpose can look completely different for each of them. Meaning, for example, one of them might become a child therapist because she feels that she wants to help children experiencing abuse to recover. Whereas the other woman, stepping into her purpose, wants to become an adult swimming teacher. Now, you might question, well, how is that connected to overcoming childhood abuse? It's about what was the lesson in the challenge in the first place. So, for example, the first lady that becomes the child therapist, what she needed to learn from that experience was to be heard, or how to listen and hear another person's experience. Whereas the lady that becomes the swimming teacher, what she needed to learn and embody through her challenge was how to feel strong and resilient. And in a swimming pool, when you get in and you can't swim and you feel like you're drowning, being able to swim and get yourself out of that water would give you a feeling of strength and resilience. So that lady is expressing it in that way by helping her clients to feel strong and resilient in that way. That is part of her gift. Do you see how this works? Two similar wounds, two completely different expressions of purpose on the other end of it. I think that's absolutely fascinating, because when I look at that and I work with women that have done that, it's absolutely clear that they are completely living in alignment with their purpose because of the joy and the feeling of freedom that they experience from that. So I have watched many women discover their purpose in this way. And when they reach this point in their understanding that the challenge is leading them to their purpose, they're then able to look back at the patterns in their life and see that nothing in that was wasted. It wasn't comfortable in the learning, but not one of them has ever said to me that they wish they had not learnt that. They understand that the best way that they could have learnt what they now know is to have experienced and overcome something like they did. And so it leaves them with a feeling of absolute accomplishment. The trick is to be able to discover what the challenge really is, the wound, and then discover what the purpose is, what the meaning is. So I've developed a process for discovering this core wound and our purpose, which I offer inside my Sanctuary membership. So if you are looking to discover your wound and your purpose and to be supported as you stabilize into a higher level of understanding, if that's what you're looking for, then reach out to me. I'll put the link below. But in the meantime, just take a little while, if you would like to reflect back upon your life challenges and just begin to see if you can see a pattern weaving through it and where it might be leading you. Let me know in the comments if you discover what that pattern is. I'd love to hear. Okay, I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye for now.